Despite losing 3 of 4 to Boston, there were some signs of improvement for the Chicago White Sox, although there are still plenty of issues worth discussing too on today's episode of Locked On White Sox.
You are Locked On White Sox, your daily Chicago White Sox podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, I'm your host, Todd Welter, a lifelong Sox fan and the site expert at SouthsideShowdown.com, part of the FanSided Network. And also, I've covered Major League Baseball for outlets such as the Associated Press. And thanks for making Locked On White Sox your first listen every day, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Make sure to hit the like button on today's episode. Subscribe to the YouTube channel at Locked On White Sox if you've not done so already. And also follow or subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcasts. So the White Sox are leaving Boston 5-17, but outside of Friday, there's some signs of things could be just a bit better in 2025 that I want to tackle. Plus, I also want to tackle some issues that are going to be probably recurring throughout the season. Although Friday things got bad not only because of a blowout loss, but veteran starter Martin Perez left his start with elbow inflammation. Now he might be lost for the season. I want to discuss the impact of this IL designation that will have on the rest of the season in terms of the starting rotation. And finally, not going to do an exact minor league Monday, but I do want to touch on the calls for Tim Elko to get called up. And the White Sox keep saying silently they don't believe the hype. This episode is brought to you by Monarch Money. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONMLB at Monarch Money for 50% off your first year. All right, so first of all, if it sounds like I'm on death's door, battling a little bit of a cold. My wife and daughter have been battling some massive inner ear infections. There's a plague going through my house, so I'm suiting up, playing a little bit hurt. So if I sound hoarse, it's just because I haven't had a good night's sleep in like the last 2 days. Okay, so we've got that out of the way. But I would score the White Sox having 2 moral victories and 1 official one in this 4-game set against Boston. And hey, after that disastrous 2024 season, I'd take that. Hopefully you are. Although there's some folks out in these streets that are still very, very upset with the start that the White Sox are off to. And I don't blame them because enduring another losing season, it's frustrating. It's not fun to go through. I mean, even though we know this is going to be a massive build, and I still maintain that a lot of their cornerstone players are still playing in college or high school. You know, nobody wants to sit through all this losing. It's not fun to watch. But, you know, as it stands, too, especially when you've only got maybe 3 core hitters on this roster right now, and maybe the chance to add 2 or 3 more in Kyle Teal, Colson Montgomery, and Brian Ramos, who might be up at some point this season. And I'll touch on Tim Elco in the third segment. But really, you're not getting a huge, I talk about the hope, but it's a very small sample size of hope. You know, in terms of the rotation outside of Shane Smith, right now you got Sean Burke on a stay of execution and Jonathan Cannon clearly trending towards just being nothing more than a 5th starter in his career. And with the depth the Sox have in their system, even though a bulk of it is still not available because a lot of them have had Tommy John surgery, and I'll touch on that in the second segment, I'm not sure you can say Jonathan Cannon is going to be in the rotation on the next competitive team we're hoping to see by 2027. Maybe Sean Burke. Shane Smith is trending towards that way. And I'll talk about what he needs to get over in the second segment. But otherwise, you got 3 or 4 guys that you can count on to be the core. So yeah, I get the frustration. But remember, there's a silver lining this season. The White Sox will be eligible for the number 1 pick in the draft lottery. So you do have a chance at a top 5 pick. You get a silver lining there. And, again, when it comes to this exercise of the 2025 season, you just want to look for any signs of improvement when it comes to the big picture from 2024. Because remember, the big picture and the 40,000 foot view and the right there you zoom in view, everything was bad. Everything was just horrendously awful. Rotting carcass of an organization. But under Will Venable, you want to see, okay, maybe can he help, put in a style of play, improve the culture, at least in the big picture, can we have some signs of progress? And I think you got some in this series against the Boston Red Sox. The first thing is the White Sox did not play like a team you scheduled for homecoming to get an easy victory. That was nice. Sox actually fought the Red Sox for 9 innings on Patriots Day. And that's basically homecoming for the Boston Red Sox. So one game that starts at like 11:15 every year. So for us, it was 10:10. It's one of the reasons why I'm recording this episode later in the day. That's when the world looks at Boston. It's the Boston Marathon. The Red Sox always play early in the day. So you would think, hey, you would want the White Sox to at least represent themselves well. And it was on MLB Network. I think it was, though, they only carried the regional broadcast. It wasn't like an official, national broadcast. But they didn't look terrible. And again, that's signs of progress, even though that's kind of sad to be like, hey, just don't look terrible out there. I get it. But Jonathan Cannon comes up with getting 2 big outs to minimize the damage in the third inning. So that's an encouraging sign for him. But I think all you can expect from Cannon at this point, this is going to be one of the first issues that I think is going to be recurring, is he just doesn't have that wipeout pitch. And it's going to make him hard to get beyond just being a fifth starter. He just getting an 0-2 count, that's not the problem for Jonathan Cannon. It's not. Problem is getting that third strike. And it happened again. Happened on the home run he gave up to Reif Snyder in the second. Sox jump out to the 1-0 lead. 1-0 lead gone pretty early because, again, 0-2 count, Cannon can't come up with that swing and miss pitch. He is basically a junk ball pitcher. I mean, to put it nicely, it's not terrible to say that, but he's trying to induce weak contact. He's not a strikeout guy. And again, it happened on an 0-2 count because he can throw some strikes, but again, it's not like he's going to miss a ton of bats. 0-2 count, Christian Campbell, 2 RBI single in the third. He's able to get the first 2 strikes too. First 2 pitches, boom, boom, strike. And then he can't get strike 3. Campbell works the count full, and now Cannon has to throw a pitch, basically a pitch-perfect strike. And since his base is loaded, guess what? It's RBI time because he doesn't have that blow-away stuff. So him and Brian Bannister are going to have to work on something if he wants to take that next step. Otherwise, he's going to be a guy that might eat innings if he can keep his pitch count low, which he did. He did yeoman's work. He was able to go 6 this time, and the bullpen really needed a slow work day after working a ton on Friday and Saturday. But hey, the White Sox, they fought back in the 8th. Benintendi, who, hey, Red Sox, if you want him back, give us a scratch-off prospect and take on his salary. And you can afford it because he loves pulling the ball to that short porch. Had a couple of home runs. You could tell he loved hitting at Fenway. I don't know why he ever left Fenway. I mean, I know they traded him, I think, to the Royals, but man, you'd think he'd want to go back because that short porch down to right, he loves hitting that ball. Hits a home run. Luis Robert Jr. also reaches second on a fielding error. And you're thinking, okay, here we go. They're fighting. There's some progress. However, another reoccurring problem, number 2, hitting with runners in scoring position. That's going to be a big picture problem. And it was in this game too. Unable to get Luis Robert Jr. home. Team went 0 for 8 with runners in scoring position. They did get an RBI ground out in the first, which also, by the way, White Sox offense, scoring runs early, that's not the problem. And they've actually been doing really well hitting in the first inning. It's keeping it going that's been the problem. But losing 4-2 on Patriots Day, when it could have been an absolutely devastating loss because in that third inning, it was looking like, okay, Cannon's going to give up a big number here. You take it. At least you're not the homecoming defeat, the homecoming blowout loss. What I want to get to, though, is Saturday and Sunday when, yes, you saw some looming issues like Shane Smith. So looming issue number 3, Shane Smith, third time in the order, getting through that. And Sean Burke still hanging up sliders in the zone that hitters are tattooing. But on the flip side, the White Sox did do damage on Saturday after Garrett Crochet left the game after the 6th inning. And hey, they actually got 4 hits and 2 walks off their former ace. Again, baby step progress. And for those that are saying, why are you being positive? Hey, I've been accused of being too negative. So let's try at least looking at the bright spot of things too, maybe. I don't know. But the White Sox struck back in the third after being down 3-0. They tie the game in part because Chase Mydroth, who went 3 for 5 in that game, drove in a run. And then it's 80 degrees in Boston. So, hey, Luis Robert Jr., he's going to crush a home run. And he did. Absolutely demolished one over the Green Monster. But what I liked the most was the pen for the next 3 innings. Despite putting runners on, getting big outs, especially Jordan Leisure. That was huge. Very impressed by Jordan Leisure. Thank you for making me loud wrong for a day and showing a sign of progress. Because in Detroit, he didn't make those big pitches. On Saturday, he came up with some huge, big-time, big boy pitches that makes you think, maybe this guy can still be a high-leverage guy. However, 1 for 10 with runners in scoring position, and in the 10th inning, that's where it reared its ugly head. As the White Sox having 2 on and no one outs, they can't get a run through. They can't get the Manfred runner in. And now you could possibly agree with Ozzie Guillen in the post-game show, or I think it was the pre-game show the day after. But either way, he said Will Venable should have ordered the bunt to at least get the leading run to third, but Andrew Benintendi strikes out after Lenyn Sosa, who again was not ordered to bunt, and Andrew Vaughn flying out. That just makes it mute. Now, obviously, if Benintendi puts the ball in the air, it's a different story. I get that, but it goes down to they just didn't execute at all. So that renders it mute there. Also, you could argue that Rule 5 pick Mike Vassell should not have been pitching in the bottom of the 10th, but hey, with Perez leaving in the 3rd the night before, that bullpen was taxed. I mean, they were going to have to use Mike Vassell at some point. But what I loved was on Sunday, the White Sox finally break a bad mark they accrued in 2024. And it was like back-to-back coming up. Scott Merkin from MLB.com and also Chuck Garfien, the CHSN pre- and post-game host, they both tweeted this out. For Scott Merkin, at Scott Merkin, White Sox were 0-79 when trailing after 6 innings last year and 0-12 this year when trailing after 6 innings until today. White Sox, and then Garfien were saying White Sox were 0-79 last year when trailing after 6 innings. They come back from down 4-2 in the 7th and win 8-4. And that's a big sign of the progress there. The White Sox won a game after trailing in the 6th. I think they only won 1 time last year after trailing after 8 innings. One moment. And that's the other thing, guys, as I battle this cold, you might have to bear with me if I hit the pause button, that type of stuff. But who leads the comeback? Some of the players, though, you can possibly peg as core pieces on that potentially, hopefully, please be good in 2027 team. And also, Venables showed some interesting strategy to prove, man, you might be an outside-the-box thinker that could press the right buttons. Bases loaded in the 7th, down 2, and Brooks Baldwin lays down a sac bunt. Totally takes the Red Sox by surprise. What was interesting, and I was listening to the radio call at the time because I was running errands, at first letting DJ question it, and I wonder if someone told them, hey, you broadcast for Jerry, because they changed their tune really quickly. But it worked out because, and why they were questioning it was they were basically bunting for 1 run while down 2, with bases loaded. Why would you do that? But it works out because it took the double play out of the equation, and pinch hitting Edgar Caro executes with an RBI double. And when players execute, managers look like geniuses. So just remember that. And they even got some insurance runs. They snap a 6-game losing streak. They finally went on the road. I mean, those insurance runs, Andrew Vaughn hit a home run. However, he's still struggling at the plate. Miguel Vargas, he actually showed that if he's pulling the ball, he can get on base. However, he did it 1 time. So there's still looming issues. But I will score the series again as some moral victories achieved, some signs of progress, but still, you got a lot of recurring problems. Well, there's also a new problem for the White Sox. Martin Perez left to start early on Friday. He went from needing a 15-day IL stay, went back to Chicago to get some imaging done, and now he's on the 60-day IL. Let's discuss how this impacts the starting rotation the rest of the season next on Locked On White Sox. Ever check your bank account and wonder, where did all my money go? Between dining out, online shopping, and entertainment, it's easy to lose track. That's where Monarch Money comes in, your personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app, it's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place, so you stop just managing your money and you start building wealth. Instead of juggling multiple apps, you can use Monarch to check your finances, track spending, and even plan long-term goals. Managing your money with your partner is smoother than ever. You can track shared and personal accounts, set goals, and stay on the same page without the stress. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONMLB at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONMLB for half off your first year. Welcome back to Locked On White Sox. I'm your host, Todd Welter. Again, make sure to hit the like button on today's episode. Subscribe to the YouTube channel at Locked On White Sox if you've not done so already. And if you can't catch the show on YouTube, Locked On White Sox is available on all major podcast platforms. So make sure to follow or subscribe on places such as Apple or Spotify. Either way, get your 30-minute fix of Chicago White Sox baseball venting with me. I just always ask, you make me your first listen because there's a lot of great White Sox podcasts. On FeedSpot, for example, we are in the top 15. Let's get our rating up there so we can, move up the charts. Martin Perez is likely done for the season. That's what you should assume because he's probably facing a Tommy John surgery, although the team has not officially announced what the absolute diagnosis is, but they have announced, and I've got the tweet up for those watching on YouTube. White Sox make 3 roster moves prior to today's series finale at Boston. The Chicago White Sox made the following 3 roster moves. They selected the contract from Class AAA Charlotte, Bobby Dahlbeck, placed on the 10-day injured list, infielder Chase Mydroth, right thumb inflammation, and transferred to the 60-day injured list, left-handed pitcher Martin Perez. So first, Mydroth sounds like he was playing through this thumb issue, and it got to the point where gripping the bat was just too tough. It was becoming unbearably painful. So no break, just some rest, and he should be back once the 10 days is up. And he even went back, he was supposed to start on Sunday. Obviously couldn't grip the bat, gets scratched, but he still goes into the game later as a defensive replacement. But it's obviously the left thumb, so he can obviously throw that type of stuff. But when it comes to gripping the bat, they've realized, and smartly, smartly put him on the IL, let it heal up. There's no reason to have these guys try to work their way through these injuries if they're less than even 90%, and if they can't grip the bat, because it's a lost season. And for those saying, oh, why are the White Sox always hurt? It sounds like, he had this issue going back into spring training, probably took something off his thumb, ball off his thumb. I'm not going to totally blame the White Sox on this. Same thing with Martin Perez. He was supposed to be that innings eating veteran who, if he had a solid season, could be flipped at the trade deadline. He's no longer available. I mean, it's when you go to the 60-day IL, I don't think this is, he just needs a really long rehab program. This sounds like his arm has eventually, because again, there's only so many bullets in these guys' proverbial arms figurative bullets in their arms. And eventually something's going to give out because, again, you're doing just something completely unnatural to your body. And as my guy Noah Fallon points out, I've had him on the show last year. He had this up on Twitter at Noah P245. I like this that he points out. I really don't know how the Sox are going to get through 162 innings wise. Your one inning eater is done for the season. Cannon and Burke have barely been able to get good to go 5 innings because they stink. Shane Smith is good, but he tires out after like 70 pitches. What is the plan here? Although, hey, I'm not sure Burke stinks overall. Just thinks he's going through, like I said, I think he's just going through baseball's cup for him. And he's got to adjust back. And one of the adjustments he has to make is he's got to stop hanging his slider and his curve. And also, I think what was interesting was the TV broadcast. I think they brought it up on Sunday. His stuff has just not looked the same since taking that liner off his knee against Minnesota. And he did tell, I think it was Schriffen said that, on off days, it does bother him. So it's hard for him to get his work in, which is like, then if he's hurt, put him on the 15-day IL. I know your depth is thin, but Burke is vital in the long run. He's part of this exercise of finding guys that should be part of your core for 2027. So put him on the IL. You just put Chase Mydroth on the IL with a hurt thumb. And also Stoney has pointed out, Steve Stone has pointed out on the broadcast, he's just wild in the strike zone right now. Although not getting much defensive help on Sunday, that's not his fault. He gives up 4 runs, 3 runs in the first. 2 of them were unearned, so you can't really put that on him. He just did not get any defensive help that inning. But he does bounce back to go, 5 innings allowed, 5 innings, which allows him a stay of execution. Although Sean Anderson, former host of the show on CHGO, he had a good tweet on, because Ozzie Guillen was even saying, how long, because Sean Burke has just not been crisp since taking that pitch off his knee. And even he was like, how long do you give this guy a leash? And Sean was like, this guy was your opening day starter. And I kind of agree. It's just, can you just not hang pitches. And again, you don't have depth because we're going to go through this exercise right now. I'm going to go over right now, like I said, dealing with this cold. But getting through innings is going to be tough if Cannon Burke and Davis Martin still prove that they're inconsistent at doing it. I mean, because it leaves this rotation without a veteran presence with Martin Perez now gone because he's earned the respect of Cannon Burke and Davis Martin. And you got to wonder who is replacing Perez in the rotation. Now, they did call up Jared Chester to replace Perez on the roster, but he pitched Saturday in relief for Smith, who was just, in terms of Shane Smith, he's just going through the normal rookie issue of just, you got to get through the third time in the order. He's got to build up his stamina because he gave up 3 runs on Saturday through 4 1/3, and it's the same issue that he's been reaching lately. Sometimes he's been able to clear the bar, and sometimes he hasn't. So I'm not totally worried about Shane Smith because, again, when you just look at the stuff, you're like, ooh, that's some good stuff there. But when it comes to who's going to fill Perez's spot right now for Wednesday, it's still to be determined. And there's not a ton of options since Drew Thorpe, Kai Bush, and Mason Adams, who I think they were counting on to be the depth, are not available because they're on the IL. They all had Tommy John surgery. They're gone. That's the problem with Tommy John surgery. And that's the problem of today's modern pitchers. Brian Bannister did say that this is the risk you're going to run because you have to throw your best pitches because these guys are going onto the plate to do damage. The only thing you lose with an elbow injury is you just lose time. And in this case, you're going to lose depth. Like I said, I'm dealing with this cold. And you could argue why not go with Noah Schultz, Higgins Smith, or Grant Taylor, but I doubt they go that route as they're still trying to build up their arms just to handle big league innings. And I also think if they're going to bring up anybody, it's going to be Taylor, and they're going to put him in the bullpen to take advantage of his power stuff. So here's what you're left with at AAA. Unless you go with Vassell, who's at least stretched out as a long reliever, you could do that, and he has started at AAA in his past, life with the Mets. But otherwise, when it comes to the Knights, and you got to ignore the ERA because it's a bandbox ballpark. You got to ignore the ERA. It's kind of like Coors Field where if he's got a good ERA, you look at it and you go, all right. But if it's bad, you just got to go with the mitigating factors that it's a hitter's park, 2AT. So I tend to look at whip and strikeouts instead. And right now you got Kevin Durant's buddy, Justin Dunn, with 27 Ks, but a 1.45 whip. Jairo Iriarte, his whip is 2.46. Nick Nastrini, 1.66. Owen White, 1.43. So Nastrini and White are already on the 40-man. So all you got to do is just make a 26-man roster adjustment. You could go with Bryce Wilson, who was a swingman for the Brewers last year, although he's much better in relief. So the options, not the best, Bob. And this team has now lost a viable trade asset at the deadline. Now his value at this point was Ronaldinho Jimenez, because that's what the Pirates got for him at the trade deadline last year. And I'm not sure he could have maintained what he was producing, but if he did, maybe he wasn't, and he had continued to have an Eric Fetty-like season, at least you maybe get a better scratch-off prospect. And at this point in the build, it's all about asset collection. And right now, collecting viable assets are not looking good. If Luis Robert Jr. can't hit once the weather gets better, and now that Martin Perez is on the 60-day IL. Well, Bobby Dahlback is up instead of hot-hitting prospect Tim Elco. And I want to go over on today's sort of minor league Monday what that move says about what the organization thinks of Elko. And that's next on Locked On White Sox. All right, welcome back to Locked On White Sox. I'm your host, Todd Welter. Shout out to all the everydayers. I appreciate your loyalty. Please hit the like button on today's episode. Recommend to your fellow Sox fans or baseball fans, friends, to subscribe to the YouTube channel at Locked On White Sox or wherever they get their podcasts. Remember, a few shows back, I admitted I'm an Elko truther, but it's more of he's a super cheap player. Play him at first base, which is a non-premium position. Maybe you get the potential of a Matt Davidson one-hit wonder season, and I'm fine with that, especially after the Sox have been wasting $5.8 million on Andrew Vaughn when that money could have been allocated for better bullpen pitchers to be flipped at the deadline, or another viable veteran starting pitcher like Jose Quintana. Could have, again, better use that $5.8 million instead of hoping, hey, Andrew Vaughn's going to eventually hit in June. And when he does hit, it's going to get his number back to replacement level. And then he's going to go on a July slump. Again, look at his career numbers. He might hit again in August, and otherwise, it'll be just another replacement level season. That's not money well spent for a team that's pitching its pennies. But the White Sox keep saying silently what they think of the hot-hitting Elko, and not very highly. That's what they keep saying, basically silently. Because if they really thought highly of him, he would be up by now. Now, Dahlback, when it comes to, if you're looking at Dahlback and you're looking at Elko, Dahlback can play outfield and first. So I get why he got the call up. And he also has a 1.050 OPS with 4 dingers at Charlotte in his own right. And he's got way more big league experience. So I get why they made that call. However, they keep giving Nick Maton at bats over Elko, who's, Elko's hitting 361 at Charlotte with a 1.05 OPS and 4 dingers. And they keep giving Andrew Vaughn more opportunities. And he did hit a home run on Sunday, but still, he's in his early season slump. And by keeping Elko down, I just think they still believe he can't replicate this at the big leagues since he is 26 and he was a 10th round pick. And maybe they're still saying his strikeout rates are way too high, or they really want to give Andrew Vaughn every opportunity. But as Baseball America's Eli Ben Borat has shown, and I want to share this. He had this up on X, formerly Twitter, at Eli Ben Porat. Tim Elko's Air EV leads all AAA hitters, just ahead of Roman Anthony. Full write-up is done. Will grace the virtual pages of your hopefully favorite baseball prospect site tomorrow. Dude's going to mash and has made some huge gains in contact and swing decisions. And if you look at his chart, for those watching on YouTube, it's much, great at putting the ball in the air, great at doing a lot of things that you want to see out of your first baseman and DH, things that Andrew Vaughn just isn't doing. And Sean Anderson, former host of the show, actually asked him, and he's got some information on Andrew Vaughn, again, just being kind of a weak contact, not as major of a power hitter compared to, look at Elko. I mean, this is a guy that I agree. Why are they still not giving him an opportunity? Especially when he discovered this. Tim Elko, Nate Eaton, and Tanner Murray are 3 late career guys who have tapped into significantly more power. I think it might be a trend across baseball as the standard of athletic excellence gets pushed higher and higher. And right now, you need power because in the games you've won, you usually are hitting a home run. So why not tap into power? Instead, Nick Maton gets at bats. And Vaughn, who they did at least drop on the order on Sunday, and he did not play today, still gets opportunities. And the Sox go with Dahlback first overall, Elko, who has a lot more club control and most importantly is cheap. And I don't even think he's going to get the next call up. I think Brandon Drury is next, the veteran. And I'm surprised he actually wasn't called up over Dahlback, since isn't it time for him to return anyway? I'm not sure why he's still in Charlotte on this rehab assignment. Does he really need that much time to ramp up? And I wouldn't be shocked if Brian Ramos gets called up before Elko. If the White Sox finally get tired of Miguel Vargas not being able to do anything, it wouldn't shock me if they go with Ramos. So I don't get it because all he's done is hit at every level, and especially they gave Brooks Baldwin a shot, at least when it comes to, obviously Elko's a much different hitter profile, and he's 26, where Baldwin is still 24, I believe. But they gave Baldwin a shot because he was just raking everywhere he went. And I get why they maybe gave him a shot because he's a few years younger. He's a switch hitter, but he got the crack. And right now, he might be that pre-2022 Lowry for the next good team. Maybe his ceiling is Ben Zobrist, which I think that's what they think of Baldwin. But I'm with you folks, as I'm baffled that Elko still hasn't got a shot, especially when the whole point of the season is give runway to as many of these prospects this team has in the system ready for a big league shot. Well, that wraps up this edition of Locked On White Sox. Thank you for making Locked On White Sox your first listen today. For your second listen, check out the all-new Locked On MLB Game Night. Every game, every night, all season long. Get local analysis on a national scale. Find MLB Game Night on Locked On MLB on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcasts. And I'll be back tomorrow to discuss what to watch for in the upcoming series against the Twins. Feel free to leave comments about today's discussion regarding the Sox showing some signs of progress even though they lost the series to Boston. Martin Perez's injury having a major impact, and Tim Elco still not getting called up. You can leave them at the episode page on YouTube, X, formerly Twitter, at ToddJDub, or at Locked On White Sox, or you can email me at lockedonwhitesox@gmail.com. Have a great day, and I will see you tomorrow.